podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, sisters. I'm Tom. Oh, hell, here we go again. Yes, FPL launched for the new season today with relatively little fanfare. They got on with it. Yay. And as such, we've dusted off our mics and are back for season bloody 10 of Who Got the Assist. There have been trials, there have been tribulations, mostly in terms of keeping a co-host, let's be fair. And there have been disgusting ranks, good ranks, but above it all, we've all had lots of fun. And we can't wait to do it again. And I'm joined, as always, by Sam. All good, mate? Honest man now, how was your summer?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for welcoming me back for another season. I think this is season 4 for me, so hopefully it's a good one. But yeah, summer was good. I am now a married man, and that all went off without a hitch. That was brilliant fun. Highly recommend doing that kind of thing. It was a lot of money, but a lot of fun. And I feel very refreshed as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting going again. Probably be a few cobwebs for the first half an hour of doing this, but I think we both mutually agreed the other day that once we get into the flow of things, it'll just be like we've never really gone away at all. So yeah, FPL launched and we're all very excited about that. And I quite enjoyed the fact that they only did a few price releases and then just said, you know what, here, have the game. I'm all for that, and long may that continue. Anyway, we are Who Got the Assist, and well, I mean, we probably should do a little bit of a welcome back into any newbies out there. Talk a little bit about what Who Got the Assist is all about, right, Tom?
Yeah. So we've been going for 10 years now. I suppose we started off as the USP being stats. Well, that's been obviously exploded. And I suppose it kind of evolved through the years through various co-hosts. I've been here the whole time. It's not a me problem, I promise. It's a other people having lives problem. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just a pod who engage in grown-up discussion. I think it's fair to say about FPL. Don't get too carried away with the hype. Don't get too sort of over-enamored by, the external influences that are on FPL at the moment, such as algos and things like that. Try to have our own mind, try to look at things objectively. And I suppose, the way we always used to talk about it was we're not telling you who to pick as such, but why you should pick them. And I think that's still something that I try to hold true in my heart. We try to assist you, not, score the goal for you. Does that work? I'm not even sure if that works, Sam.
I quite like that. Yeah, I mean, we are called Who Got the Assist, so we should be all about assisting rather than actually putting the ball in the back of the net. I think the metaphor holds up, and if it doesn't, it's day one. Give us a break. It's fine. But yeah, that's also largely why I got into the pod in the first place. I was a long-term listener before being invited on, I think, as a guest once or twice. I think it would have been season 6 of Who Got the Assist, and I was listening to it for a good couple of years before that, probably 3 or 4 years even before that. So yeah, it's been quite a fun ride being sort of a listener for a while, enjoying it grow, and then getting closer and closer. We met at meets and finally getting invited on. And once you got me on the pod once, you basically were stuck with me forever. So apologies for that, and apologies to all the listeners, but I'm not going anywhere. So tough. You've got a Southampton fan on the pod forevermore, like you did with Lucy as well. So we've got to keep that going. But yeah, it's great to be here. I'm really excited for another season, and hopefully a very successful one for the pod as well.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, lots to look forward to. We will give an outline of how we're going to approach the regular pods this season close to the time. Lots to get through in the meantime. Starting with today, which I suppose, Sam, is more of a hot take house, more of a reactive piece, as FPL was just launched, getting on for about 7 or 8 hours ago.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we're not going to be doing anything crazy on this pod. We're going to be going through a quite typical agenda. I'll run through it very quickly now for you. So we're going to start off with looking at the pricing this year. What's our general view on it? Any hot takes across the board? We might mention a few specific players there. Before then moving on to how we think the game, as in FPL, have approached it this season and maybe why they've done it in a specific way, why they've structured the pricing in a certain way, and also what changes have been made to the game and why have they approached the changes in a specific way. Obviously not wholesale changes, more quality of life stuff. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one to have a look at, why perhaps they've left a few bigger changes for another season and kept a few things from last year. And of course, providing our views on all of that. And then we're also going to quickly mention World Cup and whether or not there's some fatigue there, probably both for players, but then also fantasy managers as well to an extent. And then, of course, we have to look at some first drafts. We both put one together. I can't imagine that there's a very solid template forming just yet, but there will almost certainly be one or two players that are in most drafts. So yeah, interested to see what yours looks like, and we'll obviously be running through that towards the middle to end of the show. And then of course Tom will run through the preseason schedule for us for what the WGTA run order is looking like for the first few weeks as we build into preseason and then game week 1. So with that in mind, it's Thursday the 23rd of July, almost 60 days since our last pod. We did have a chat last week to, again, just get our minds right for the season ahead. FPL was launched, but there's lots of things to discuss and lots of weeks yet to discuss them in. So where should we start?
Oh, let's just dive right into the pricing, shall we? It's it's certainly an interesting one this year. And before the game was launched, I'd written a few notes, and I think the main sort of overriding thing I was gonna say before we saw the rest of the prices was, credit to them for thinking about Haaland, Bruno, and Gabriel more deeply than in the past. Southerns at the wheel, and stopping the eventuality where all three of those guys, for good reason, would have been in every team at the start of the year if they'd priced that kindly. It was absolutely fine. But when the game reopened today, I felt a little bit differently, it's fair to say. I'm still very excited about the start of FPL. Let's not kind of do that down. But I was saying to the friend of the pod, Fruki, on Blue Sky, I need to call a lawyer about PPI, player price index, because I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of bargains basically to account for the high pricing of those players, and it just felt like they compensated for those high prices by giving you players like João Pedro at 7.5 holding price despite 177 points last season. Compare that, I'm aware it's an isolated example, to Tijani Reinders getting a 0.5 million rise off the back of a 92-point season. Thinking about it a little bit, so your elective budget is 36 million. You have to spend, so if you do every goalkeeper and defender, you've got to pay 4 million for them. Midfielders and strikers 4.5. So you've got to spend 64 million to populate your team. That means you've got 36 million to actually play with, and making that work is kind of key. But we've only got two players this year over 10 million, and if everyone has Bruno and Haaland, which probably is going to be a thing, let's face it, because all the other players are kind of underpriced, then it follows that the puzzle that we were hoping to have with kind of quite a competitive pricing structure isn't there. And good friend of the pod, Dave CZ, said on Blue Sky to me as well that they perhaps framed it wrong or keyed into anchor bias in the way that annoys the Sanaraks. Like we all felt yesterday, on Tuesday, that on Wednesday, that the prices may be quite difficult this year, but it seemed like it was a false dawn, even if you were to pass on one of Bruno or Haaland because of the low pricing across the board, your premiums they won't be exclusive. It won't be that difficult for people to get there, and it feels difficult to use your whole budget. Indeed, I did have a play about with this. If you go without one of Bruno or Haaland, I was hoping they would be, but they simply aren't. Players that we're going to be able to go without. It's not as big a question. It's more of a Haaland yes or no. And if you go no, well, actually the benefit you get doesn't seem that high because actually the rest of the players aren't that expensive. Like I did say on the end of season data thing that maybe it is a squad game this year more than ever before. The premiums obviously last year completely failed to produce statistically, and maybe that's what we're seeing. But I do feel like because of the pricing being quite generous, we might see some very sort of similar game week 1 sides as a result. Like the overriding principle seems to have been don't allow people to own Gabriel, Haaland, and Bruno, but it's come at a cost. Well, a payback, which is the rest of the pricing, I think. Obviously, still excited to play. Still excited for another season. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. But yeah, when I saw the rest of the prices, it did feel a bit like, oh, okay, right, I see what you've done here. It's more of a kind of, yeah, you've undercut basically everything else to mean these 3 guys that would be essential otherwise. It's not quite possible to get them all in.
Yeah, I largely agree with everything you've said there. Yeah, I was optimistic when I saw Haaland and Bruno's price in particular. Gabriel also comes into it, but I think with Gabriel, it does feel like the most natural player of the 3 that you could sacrifice, given that because he's a defender, you can cover off clean sheets for cheaper. Of course, there are other ways he scores points that makes him a superior asset to the other Arsenal defenders and goalkeeper. But is it worth that extra 2.5 million for Gabriel just to get the 3 or 4 more goals a season that he might get, plus a few DEFCONs as well? Possibly. But out of the 3, given captaincy in the game is so important, and there are only really 2 proper captain shouts right now, especially given the early fixtures, most people are going to want Haaland and Bruno to begin with. Some people will maybe compromise on Bruno and look at Cunha and Burmo instead. Absolutely fine. But I'm just of the mindset, keep it simple with Bruno and Haaland to begin with. Let other people take the risk, and then after 3-4 game weeks, it might become clear that you could go without them. But I think you can build a very strong side with both of those in, at the very least, just by sacrificing Gabriel and using that 2.5 million. What I will say, though, is I've done quite a bit of like looking around during the day, as one does across social media and a few drafts online. I haven't seen many teams that are all that similar just yet. And maybe it's just because it's early days and the template hasn't really formed yet. But I think weirdly what's possibly happening is because there's really kind pricing in a number of positions across midfield, across the forward line as well. I wonder if it just basically gives us a bit like, when we went from like analog TV to digital, and it went from like 5 channels to 300 channels all of a sudden. It's like, I don't know what to watch. There's just too much stuff. I feel a little bit like that, where it's like there are loads of really good options at really good prices, but of course you can't have them all. So I'm seeing quite a few different combinations going around, centered around the proviso that you have Haaland and Bruno anyway. And then beyond that, there's quite a lot of different pieces being added to that puzzle. I wonder how long that will last. There's always a template and a preferred selection that forms. And there are some that are just so obviously underpriced that I think they will just become quite template. But like I've been messing around quite a lot on FPL today. I'm like, oh yeah, but I really want that 8 million midfielder, or that 7.5, or that. There are like 3 or 4, 6 million forwards that I really like the look of. And I do wonder if maybe not through FPL being smart about the pricing, but more just because they're all blanket around the same sort of price anyway, we're going to get a few different combinations. But we'll see. We'll see. It's early days. There might be a template that forms by this time tomorrow. But I'm very open to a number of players at the moment. I'm not feeling too strongly about one structure, like formation or draft.
No. I think that's a good point about decision paralysis, actually. There are an awful lot of potential picks in the kind of consideration set, as it were. And maybe he is the Southerns long game, Sam. Maybe he has just mega-minded it and made us think that, the pricing's bad. And then after a few weeks of playing with it, suddenly we'll be like, oh my goodness, this is a work of an absolute genius. And it might be that way. And we did say at the end of last year, with Salah leaving, that there wasn't really an obvious sort of heir to the premium throne, as it were, in terms of the chonky, big ticket sort of players, right? Like players like Palmer, Isaac, Saka, players who in the past have merited the double-digit price tag, just don't seem to have performed commensurate with getting that. So it might be the case that with everything going on, with fatigue from the World Cup, obviously not the case of Palmer and co, but you know what I mean. With lots of competitions, with squads in the real Premier League getting more and more bloated. I mean, Chelsea seems like going to go on yet another mass buying spree, just to give one example. Maybe it is the case that being more minded to pack your squad with quality rather than siphoning your resources towards one or two key men does eventually become the thing. But I think you're right in terms of what you said kind of straight off the bat, that it's very unlikely. I know it's kind of quite safe, but at the start of the season, I don't see any reason why I would risk going without Haaland and Bruno. I just don't really see that. And I was hoping that there would be a reason within the pricing for me to potentially consider that. As it is, it's kind of like, right, those two are locked in, at the moment, as I see it. I'm sure I will mess around with a few things, mess around with wildcard game week 3 or something like that. But as it stands, I just think that I'm basically playing with 27.5 million locked in for those two, and the rest of it is sort of revolving parts, which is absolutely fine because there is enough to keep me going. It's a short preseason as well. This will all be forgotten by in 3 or 4 weeks' time. And as Nobby said in the chat, once the season actually starts, then we won't be talking about this anymore. We're talking about, we could totally forget about this guy, but he's done loads of goals in game week. We better get him in. How do we do that? I think that the conversation will soon shift. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I think that the reception has been decidedly mixed. I don't think that people are kind of overall saying this is a really good pricing set. I don't think people are saying it's necessarily a bad pricing set, but if pushed, I think people would kind of mostly be slightly on the negative side. But then again, I'm quite excited to see kind of how we do it. And the next couple of weeks, we're going to be looking at the the chonky players, and also the tiddlers, the more kind of the mid to low price players. See what gems we can unearth, and all the different combinations you could possibly put together, because there's a lot out there. And the fixtures themselves, I guess, Sam, don't exactly lend themselves straight up, apart from for United and obviously City game week 3 of Coventry, to a particular team to go all in on. Whereas in other years, I think we have seen particular teams have really good starts, which have made you think, yeah, okay, I'm just going to get 3 of them and see what happens by game week 4 or 5.
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to the quality of the league now. I think we saw that last year, and the 3 teams going down were probably of a higher quality across the board than the 3 the season prior. And generally from 17th all the way up to 5th or 6th, even if you're top of the league, you're not banking on a win against any of those teams. It's always a competitive game. And therefore, there are no great fixture runs. Basically, there can be some good ones, because if you get a sprinkling of 2 or 3 of the promoted sides in a 5 to 7 game week stretch, then that's obviously something to target. But I rarely look at any given fixture run now and think, right, that is just absolute gold dust. Need to triple up, need to go triple attack, and make sure that all of my budget goes on that, because I just don't think we've got 5 or 6 great fixtures to target that could be in a row anymore. Maybe across the season, you've got 5, 6, 7 fixtures that you'd like to target for each particular team, but it's very unlikely that they'll ever come in a cluster. And therefore, the opening of this season, there are fixtures to target, specific ones, but as a stretch of, let's say, 5 game weeks, a pretty standard amount of weeks to be looking at this point. I'm not eyeing up any one particular team and thinking, yeah, right, I need a triple up, and I'll definitely be triple captaining in one of those weeks. It just luckily hasn't fallen that way, but I also think it's quite difficult to fall that way given the general quality of the league now. So that helps. And then I think the other thing I'll quickly finish on, I suppose, is although there's a lot of very favorably priced players in the game, especially when I say that, my instinct is to talk about the 8 to 6 million forward bracket. Anything between those, I think there's just a minefield of players there. And then in midfield, you've got between 8 and about 6.5, maybe even 6 million again, where you've got a raft of penalty takers, set piece takers, 90-minute men, good data. And I think the big decisions will come down to, can we get the right combination of those players? And there are just so many of them at each of those price points that I think that will actually be genuinely quite difficult to get on the right side of. And then all it takes is one Palmer or Isak or possibly Saka to come in and just get off to a really hot start. And then all of a sudden we all need to find an extra 1.5, 2 million spare from somewhere else to make sure that they're in our team. Because I think Chelsea have got like Hull game week 4, for instance. If Palmer gets off to a great start and we don't have him, then that's going to be an immediate problem by game week 4. So yeah, I can see things shifting pretty quickly. We forget all about the pricing after 2 or 3 weeks when player X gets a hat trick, and there are expensive players out there that could easily rip apart the template quite quickly.
Yeah, and they've all been priced not kindly. They've been priced in a way to cover the eventuality that, you know, Palmer, as you said, Isak, you mentioned, and as mentioned in the chat by Tony as well. And I think that absolutely makes sense how they've been priced, because as I said, their prior performance didn't merit anything higher than that. But there are a few where you look at. I mentioned João Pedro earlier on. Like that is one that I'm just kind of like, why is he 7.5 despite scoring 170? Why has he retained that price? I don't know whether it's just because they've moved a few players. I don't really understand that one. Calvert-Lewin being 6. I don't get that. You know, Pentaker did fairly well last year, only getting 0.5 million price rise. And there are a few that I look at and just think, and they've taken, it seems to any player who has ever been in the vicinity of DEFCON, you know, been the accomplice to DEFCON, has found themselves with a small price rise this year. I thought it was quite funny looking at Esri Konsa being 4.5, and I was like, yeah, that's quite funny. But even they know that the defenders don't do anything. Yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance, I think, doing the pricing. They've got to factor in some element of prior performance. They've got to factor in kind of how the game looks now, how it might look going forward. I mean, last year we did have the new DEFCON thing, and as I mentioned, the context of last season did make everything a little bit sort of skewed towards DEFCON, and the premium's not working last year kind of blew things up a little bit more as well. But I think already there probably do look to be a few gems, and there are players who could easily emerge as being ridiculously underpriced. I mentioned João Pedro, maybe Morgan Rogers being 7.5 if he's played in sort of his natural habitat. And as I think Philip on his, I'll link it at the end, but on his newsletter today's Dribble was saying about that as well. I think that could be really interesting as well. I don't know. I think I'm torn between whether the pricing has been done by somebody who understands FPL, or if the pricing has sort of been done in a way which doesn't speak to that. For me, I think it's kind of a bit hedgy, but I also think that in some places I would have preferred a slight bit more of the challenge we were anticipating yesterday overall.
Yeah, I think I would probably largely agree with you on that. I like a really challenging game, and I like a game where almost it would be great if we could realistically only have one of Haaland or Bruno. That would be a real decision. But I'm optimistic about the game because there just seem like there are so many players in that like mid-price bracket. I think we'll be shuffling between them quite a lot, and I think the name of this season's game will probably be patience. And can you hold on to a player that may not be just hitting the heights right now? Maybe there's another 7.5 million midfielder that you'd love to have, and you're holding dearly to Morgan Rogers whilst he's going through a bit of a blank run. Do you shuffle across, or do you hold your, or bide your time and hope that he comes good? I think getting the right balance between that patience and action is going to be the biggest challenge of all this season, because we will have weekly decisions to make with transfers because they're all close enough in price that action bias is going to be a very prevalent problem to deal with, I think. Whereas if if it was such that they're all quite far apart and there's not many decisions to make week on week because it's that you just don't have the free transfers to get there, then it could be quite a boring game. So I think maybe they've done it with a bit of that in mind. And I will give them the benefit of the doubt on that. There's a possibility that it's just complete accident that they've made it that way, but I'd like to think that they've got intelligent people there who know what they're doing, and I'm going to take the positive spin on things, as I always do.
I hope so. I really hope so. So a few more kind of headlines from the pricing then. All promoted defenders in at 4. So there's no sort of standout player who's kind of been given the slightly higher designation. They're all in at 4.
I like that.
I mean, maybe on one hand it's kind of like, they're just basically reflecting what's happened in the past with promoted teams. On the other hand, maybe it's kind of opening the door a little bit to kind of promoted gems coming in. I mean, realistically, I think these guys, Diop moving to Ipswich before, I guess when the pricing was locked in for them, may have been a thing, or maybe they kind of did that retrospectively actually and put him down to 4 after he'd moved. Fair enough. Our man Leif Davis, Sam, at 4.0.
Yeah.
Bear in mind.
Interesting. I'm still not over him going down the back of Saka's calf. I'm really not happy with him. Bad boy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, you look at Coventry, Hull, and Ipswich, and you just think, well, that kind of is fine, for the start of the year. I mean, good trash. I'm just not sure that, as unlike kind of last year, I'm as interested in doing a bench boost in game week 1, just because you have to have those players. And apart from Ipswich, the other 2 have got adverse fixtures, or Hull, as I'm sure you'll mention at some point during this pre-season, always have an adverse fixture.
Yeah, we won't get into it too much today, but if people are wondering what my opinion on who to target are this season, go and look at the XGC data for Hull in the Championship last season, and then look at who they're buying so far this season. I'm pretty actively targeting them, I think. But we'll see. I'm open to change, and obviously there are always exceptions to rules. So data's only one side of the game, etc., etc. But yeah, I think generally speaking, they will be a team that I'm looking to go after a little bit.
Every player who has had even a sniff of DEFCON, apart from Moses Caicedo, who's still 5.5, started off obviously like a house on fire last year, and then, well, like a train actually, rather than house on fire last year, and then sort of calmed it down. The rest of them seem to have uniformly been given a price rise, Sam. I suppose that's kind of a way of, and we'll see it as well in a minute in terms of the changes to the bonus tweaks this year. But basically, any player who's had even a sniff of DEFCON has been given a bump this year. I suppose that sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Just to try to kind of reflect what we've seen and try to kind of cut off the potential for there to be a budget gem, like someone like James Hill, for example, who started last year at 4 and is now up to 5.5. I'm surprised that Senesi was up to 6. For a player who may not even start for Spurs. I mean, that's an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to reference the same players, actually. I think generally it was a wise decision to bump them all. I think there's one or two, Senesi being one of them, that may have been bumped a little bit too far. Probably more just based on the end amount of points that he finished up on with Bournemouth last season. But I think situations change quite quickly. I can't imagine him being great value at 6, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. Van Heck at 5 at Spurs, who I think is the better of the 2 defenders. I think he probably will start. Feels interesting. And someone like Garner at 6 million. Obviously it's a bit of a bump. But he does have a bit of an attacking promise, and he's good on the DEFCON. I think he slightly averaged over 12. Of course, Elliot Anderson's the one that had the big bump in midfield, but he's also at a much better team this season as well. I would have normally said I'm not interested in the slightest at 6.5, but he is probably going to be a regular starter if Rodri's off as well. Even without Rodri off, he quite likely to get good minutes. So it all comes down to whether or not he can keep up the DEFCON hit rate. I'm just not massively convinced yet, but if someone can basically tell me that he is going to maintain at that rate, then 6.5 is going to be an absolute steal. I'm just not confident that in this team he's going to be required to do the same amount of defconning. So yeah, I think, look, across the board, I think it was generally wise to bump up the defcon players a fair bit by 0.5, maybe a million in specific situations. There are a couple that I think they've gone a little bit too far on. But generally, I think it levels it out a bit. And I don't think we're going to have as many problems last season where it's just very clearly one or two centre-backs need to be in your team just because of the defcon hit rate.
Yeah. Looking at the start of my first draft, I don't think I've got any defcon potential players, which I really need to think about actually a little bit more. Maybe I've just forgotten about it. I've erased them from my memory over the course of I got too high on my own supply of saying that, yeah, it's all just premiums. It's all just the premiums being rubbish. There's nothing to do with defcon, people. Maybe that's kind of the case. I mean, we'll see if Arteta ball stays over next year. On that note, David Raya, 6 million. Breaks the long-standing 5.5 million ceiling for goalkeepers. Obviously, we had, I think it was last year or the year before. I think it was last year where we had that big discussion at the start of the year. It was just like, I don't know, man. Have you considered just putting in Raya and just leaving him there? And I think that kind of, if he was 5.5, I think that is an example of them probably doing the right thing. Because if he was 5.5, I think he'd just be the set and get goalkeeper for everybody. At 6, I think maybe there is a little bit more to think about. But yeah, I was surprised to see him at 6, and I think that maybe the 0.5 is just because he's got a terrible haircut, so he's got to have that premium. God, that haircut annoys me even more. So it annoys me more every day. Okay, I'm very happy for him to win the World Cup, but use your winnings from doing that. Your bonus, donate most of it's charity, but use some of it. Just get a haircut, mate. You look absolutely horrendous.
Hopefully he's taken some pointers off his goalkeeping teammate in Spain. I think he's got a much sharper do now, hasn't he? So yeah, hopefully he's got some lessons there. Legend. What a man. Yeah, I mean, we won't talk too much about World Cup today, but Spain, wow. Absolutely incredible. I mean, yeah, you need to be doing something pretty special to have Raya as your second choice goalkeeper for a World Cup side. Anyway, yeah, I think with Raya, 6 million feels fair. I mean, if he came in at 5.5, he'd be in my draft, he'd be in your draft, he'd be in everyone's draft almost straight away. Because then we wouldn't have to even worry about a 5.5 million defender for Arsenal, which is currently what we're all kind of secretly doing. We're all like basically Googling how long Saliba out for, and is Calafiori definitely going to start, or is Nkapie going to get some minutes, etc., etc. And whether the Konza rumours have any weight to them. We're all scrambling a little bit for an Arsenal defender if you're not going with Gabriel, just to see if you're safe with a 5.5. If Raya was 5.5, we'd all just save ourselves the trouble. At 6, it's a decision. So I like that. I think that was the wise thing to do. And they are by far the best defence in the league. He deserves to be a notch up on all the other goalkeepers. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll get back to that in a couple of weeks. Another one we'll get back to in a couple of weeks. Pascal Gross at 5.5. I think that's actually it seems to be one who's kind of evaded the raise hammer. Might be stood out to me as being kind of the best value, 5.5. Speaking friend of the pod, James Stevenson, who said that. Ndai at 6 and DCL at 6. That felt a bit cheap for me. I mentioned DCL already, and Szoboszlai at 7 as well as Liverpool's pen take. Okay, yeah, just so. If he's right back, he gets defcons, but 90-minute man, etc. Those 3 players did stick out to me as being kind of slightly cheaper than I thought they would be, especially Ndai and DCL.
Yeah, I'd say the exact same thing. Njai at 6 immediately stood out to me. That feels cheap, especially when Dewsbury Hall is an extra 0.5. So yeah, Njai I really like at 6. And Szoboszlai as well, even if he's not on pens, and I do worry a little bit about that because we haven't really seen a large enough sample size with Isak starting. And I think as their sort of big money centre forward signing, Salah's no longer there. I do wonder if Isak's just going to pull rank and say, you know what, I'm big dog here. I'm going to take the penalties. So I have Szoboszlai as like 50% penalty share at the moment in my mind. there's a chance. But even without them, I still think 7 is reasonable value. He's got set pieces and he's got a hell of a free kick on him. Like you said, he has history of hitting DEFCON if he gets put in a more defensive role. And Liverpool have good fixtures as well. So, and also, I should mention, I almost always forget to mention on a pod talking about FPL, but he's quality. He is a fantastic player, and that counts for something. So, yeah, like Nobby says in the chat, very good timing there. He could be about to take another step up because he's a quality player. So that's something to at least take into account as well. So 7 million feels on the low side. I would have had him at 7.5. Up front, yeah, you've got DCL, Solanke, Brobby, all the Newcastle forwards, all at 6 million. You've got both Everton forwards at 5.5. You've got the only Fulham forward at 5.5 at the moment as well. So you've got tons of options there. Quite a few penalty takers in that mix as well. It's just about finding the one that's nailed to start. And if, for example, Osula is 100% nailed at 6 million, that is going to be a cheat code. If Solanke is fit, then that's a cheat code. Like, there just feels like a lot of options. I've definitely missed 1 or 2 strikers as well, by the way. Igor Jesus as well at 6 million feels like amazing value. There a lot of good, very well priced options at 6 million up front as well, I would say.
Yeah, I'm with you. Final one is that I've actually run the numbers Talisman Theory, and I will write it this year at some point in the summer. I was really annoyed because a friend of the pod, Mitchell Sterling, helped me with the AI, and the numbers that we spat out were actually normal, and I checked them and they actually make sense. So did that, and I was hoping that Morgan Gibbs-White had escaped the scattergun. Sadly, he didn't. But his end of year heroics were just ridiculous for Forest, and I was just hoping that he'd have snuck in at 6.5 or something like that. But no, sadly he's 8. But yeah, I mean, there will be a lot that will come out throughout the course of pre-season, that's for sure. I think I probably came in to the conversation with you broadly on the pessimistic side, but I think you've kind of drag me back over the line to neutral. Let's see what happens, which is obviously your effect on everybody out there.
Of course, yeah. It's all the positive vibes are seeping into the FPL community as we speak, right? That's definitely how it works.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sure there'll be more players who come to the fore. Next week we'll talk about the kind of the premium, and the high price picks. When they affectionately name the chonks, and the week after talk about the tiddlers, so the mid to kind of the budget picks, and kind of do pricing that way. But yeah, an initial thought on it there. Changes to the game this year, more conservative quality of life stuff. Not on here is the fact that I've just noticed that literally on the slideshow is that double chips do stay this year, which is cool, fun times. As mentioned, I think that probably Bench Boost 1 is off the table. You can't free hit, you can't wildcard, obviously, on Game Week 1. I think Bench Boost 1 is kind of off the table because of all the uncertainty, the fits not lending themselves to it, new managers, etc., and so on and so on. So, normally I'd love to get out of the way, but I'm not going to do it this year. But I think double chips staying is cool. That's fun. I don't mind that at all. I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was generally a good addition last season. And my biggest fear about the double chips last year was about how template and how rigid and structured everyone's strategy would be. But actually, it didn't really have much of an adverse effect in the first half of the season. Everyone kind of found their own unique strategy generally. I think it actually more affected the second half because everyone reloaded into the second half of the season with all of the chips. And therefore, we generally all ended up on quite a similar strategy. But maybe that's just me being a bit selfish because I enjoyed it previously when a lot of the less engaged managers would get rid of all of their chips to begin with. And then I could play catch up in the second half of the season, being patient with them. That is no longer the case. But that is possibly just me being a little bit selfish and wanting the best for me rather than the best for the game. And I think generally it's been a pretty good addition, and it gives more exciting things to do in the first half of the season when a lot of people feel less engaged, I suppose, if they can't use a chip or do something exciting. So yeah, generally okay with it.
Yep, start of the season, whimsical. First half, just play it whenever. I'm sure that there will be some sort of, template use, and I'm sure clever people like James at Planet will figure out a Galaxy Brain way of playing them. I might follow along, I might not. I'm not going to be as worried about that. Second half of the year, I saw that as soon as the fixtures were announced a little while ago, Ben Quillen immediately said, "Here's the blanks, here's the doubles."
Yeah,
I've learnt my
and they're
lesson.
the same.
Honestly. Yeah. I've learnt my lesson over the last few years of kind of not playing the chips in kind of the order that people do. I know it's not particularly exciting. If I'm really chasing, I might consider it, but realistically, playing the chips as we did last year, despite the fact that it was a fairly beige team that we came out with, put me in the top 100k and put you within a fighting chance of getting there. And I think I'm just going to do that again.
Yeah.
I know it's a bit paint by numbers, but it is what it is. But yeah, double chips stay cool. Price change predictor come into FPL. Why is it a predictor? Quickly, because I can't guarantee a situation where there's lots of buys or lots of sales literally at the deadline. They can't say this player is guaranteed to rise, just in case there's lots of people who then decide to sell for whatever reason, and they get told they're an idiot. It's a prediction for a reason because it's just semantics. But the price change deadline being moved to midnight, Sam, I think that's actually quite good. I think that's interesting. And there probably is going to be occasions next year where two young kids. I'm gonna see if I can be awake until midnight, or at least maybe I'll go for a wee at 11:50 and just check. Maybe we'll see. But I think that's a lot more sort of accessible to at least kind of UK or European centric managers to keep an eye on it.
Yeah,
I think that's quite a good kind of change in terms of the temporal side of things.
Yeah, I broadly agree. I think obviously big shout out to price change predictors from seasons past. I used FPL statistics. I've used live FPL. I think Focal as well on his app. I've used several through the years. They're all fantastic, have done a great job of it. I think it was inevitable at some point that FPL were going to introduce it. I'm glad that in doing so, they've also brought it to midnight. I think that just makes logical sense given that it is about FPL, which is the English Premier League. So I think it makes sense to abide by the time zone here, I guess. And yeah, on the prediction thing, I think it's all exactly the way I would do it myself, barring maybe someone suggested to me that what if they effectively lock the price changes an hour in advance and then just say, we can guarantee that these are going up, these are going down, and these were the final numbers. Make your moves now if you want to. And then that might stop like a last minute surge a little bit. And then there's less kind of blind faith in the last 15 minutes that, okay, my player's at 101%, so he is likely to go up. But what if a load of sales come in, or it gets adjusted for wildcards or something in the last minute, and then it goes under the prediction? That could be a bit frustrating. But again, like, these are such tiny details to the game. It's 0.1 here or there. And I think generally they've done the right thing in adding it to the game. And hopefully it just works as well as advertised. And if it doesn't, I'm sure they will be first to find out, because we'll all let them know.
Exactly. I think overall, yes, okay. I do kind of echo your shout out to likes of live FPL principally, who have worked long and hard to do a price change algorithm. It's always good to have it from source. I mean, that's always a good thing. It was always going to be something that they might look at for a while, and it's kind of, I suppose, a long-held quality of life question they finally answered. Like, I can remember being in my flat probably 2017-18 with Nick, just kind of saying, oh, you know what, like, one of the big things they could do is make price changes transparent. And yeah, I noticed kind of when we were talking about what the changes could be, I think on Monday, that they removed that line about, you know, like an algorithm deciding price changes, and that won't be revealed to FPL managers. That kind of set the groundwork, as well as kind of Bragabody, what he was saying on X. There were some suggestions, importance of Doom online, that it could make the more casual manager, as it were, go mad, make lots of changes. I don't think so, really. I'm interested to hear what you think, because at the start of the season, it's always fairly bananas. Let's be fair. As soon as the game kicks off, like, you have wild movements all over the shop. I always delight in people kind of there being like 400 sales of Erling Haaland's, like, when the game reopens. It's just like, oh, what, before anyone's played? Okay. I remain convinced they're bots making these ridiculous transfers. But what we always see is the simple equation of player scores points, people buy player. I think that's going to remain. I don't think, I know those people have said, it's going to make for lots of price changes, blah, blah, blah. Maybe like a tiny change, but really, I don't think having a price predictor on site will have a massive impact on behavior in terms of exacerbating it to the extent that people are saying it might.
Yeah, I think for the first couple of weeks, it might be a novelty that people engage with, even if they are more casual managers. So we might see a bit of a surge of movement in the first week or two, but I think it will simmer down pretty quickly. And if I'm just trying to put myself in the mind of a few people who I generally play in mini leagues with, who aren't quite as into FPL as we are, I don't think they're ever going to even give it a second glance after maybe trying it out once. I don't think they're so into FPL that they would even bother to look whether a player is going up or down in price. The thought wouldn't even occur to them. They'll still make their transfers either as they're watching games the week prior, or about a day before the deadline, just because it's a Friday and they're like, oh, okay, who can I move for? Even my brother, who is, I would say, actually pretty reasonably engaged in FPL now, I don't think he's ever once worried or even thought about price changes. I think he just, he effectively, almost inevitably, messages me whilst I'm at the gym in the morning on a Saturday and says, what should I do this week? And I have a look and I'm like, yeah, you can afford this, and off you go. And he makes his own mind up after that. But that's the kind of engagement that even like someone who's really into their football, pretty engaged, would go with. And I think the price change predictor is mainly going to appeal to us. We're the ones who'll look at it, and we might get the odd 0.1, 0.2 out of it across a few weeks. But I don't think it's going to have a massive effect to the player base generally, because I just don't think they're as into it as we are, and they don't obsess over things like that like we do.
Finally, our nerddom is going to have an advantage. And yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that people are looking at it through the lens of being an engaged. If you're engaged enough to be kind of propagating that potential theory online, you are in our bracket as being an anorak who's actually going to be watching it, and there's just going to be mad stuff going on all over. And moving on to squad creator, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
If you do need a little bit of help, a bit of assistance, hey, hello, there we go.
And just listen to this pod. Don't use a squad creator.
Yeah, exactly. But now you get one, which isn't just autocomplete. The key point is that there's no impact past game week 1, and that's when Copilot takes over. And if anyone's used Copilot at work, good luck to you if you're using Copilot to help you with your FPL team. New ways to help with the squad, to look at the squad. Fair. I mean, I think that's really cool. I know that FPL.team is going to, I know if you're listening, Pete, you're still going to get my custom. I'm still going to renew my payment for the year. But it's a nice way of switching up a little bit, providing a few bits and pieces to just give a little bit more context. It's nice when you're actually on the site, especially when you're drafting and you don't want to go off site for whatever reason. Say you've got a particular kind of draft that you can't be bothered to then replicate in FPL.team. It's nice to have that there if you want to look at the ownership, or you want to look at the next free FDR or something like that. But all the things at FPL.team, which is a great thing if you don't know it. It's literally as it sounds, FPL.team. It's on the App Store and stuff. That gives you like a much better look at sort of forecasting and things like that in terms of planning your side. But yeah, I think it's good enough really for what it needs to be. It's quite kind of basic, I think I'd say. I'm spoiled by Pete at FPL.team, but I'm not even paid by this guy. Pete, give us some money. But give me a little tickle. But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's good. I'm
very
fine
good.
with it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's quality of life stuff, isn't it? It saves a few clicks if you're on the website, on the app, and you just want to quickly toggle and just, my memory's a bit hazy. Like, does Gibbs White have a decent fixture next up, or what's his ownership? Very, very quick. Click, done, rather than going across to somewhere else. And they were always going to look at these kind of quality of life improvements eventually. It just happens to be they've done it all this year, all at once. So yeah, I'm generally all for it. I don't think it will affect my behavior with third-party sites or anything. It's good, but I don't think it's game breaking that it makes all of them redundant. But yeah, generally positive.
Yep, absolutely. Another thing I'm positive about is real-time updates. Another one that's been on the list for WGTA since, well, ever. I think probably the last. I play Elite Syrian, which is made by ISM, the same company that run software for FPL. They've had kind of live updates for since I've been playing the last couple of years, but I'm led to believe it's been for a lot longer. Fantasy Bundesliga have been doing it. I know that the NFL, NBA stuff all does that. I think FPL was probably the last fantasy game that was still static last year, and it'll probably improve the experience for many players. But there's one big thing missing, Sam, isn't there? It's effective ownership.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the big missing piece, but I'm glad that they don't have it, really, because that's sometimes it's a negative, to be completely frank, and I kind of wish I didn't know the effective ownership of players. World Cup I didn't, and that was great. I really enjoyed that, but that would be kind of the final piece of the puzzle that they could add to FPL and make everyone really paranoid about ownership all day, every day, forevermore. And I'm kind of glad in a way that only a select portion of the FPL player base have to worry about effective ownership, because it's definitely a blessing and a curse. And I'm not sure putting it into the FPL game is necessarily healthy, because I think I worry about it too much, and I could do with maybe looking at it less. And I think a lot of people feel that way as well. But of course, effective ownership does have its positives, so maybe it's something that they look at eventually. But yeah, all for the real-time updates. I like that element to it. And if I don't want to know the effective ownership, it's quite nice that I can just stay in FPL and still know what my live rank is. Yeah, again, generally across the board, like quality of life stuff, a lot of this is designed effectively, and like the app designer brain in me is like, yeah, this is all designed for attention. It's to keep people on the site, it's to keep people on the app for longer during the week. It's to stop people from moving about to different apps as much as they can, so that they've got a higher hit rate on their site, on their app, and that they're on for longer. And all of these things, the next two maybe not, but all the things that we've mentioned so far are all designed with that in mind, to increase the retention time, to increase the time spent on app, not just on the days where there is football, but also on the days where there isn't football. And that will be something that they've been talking about a lot over the last year or so.
Yeah, some insight. Have you considered a career in this?
Maybe. I'll think about it.
I think you might be right at that. But yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you. I think that effective ownership is obviously a tool in our arsenal, and I'm completely and utterly with you that I wish I could scrub the memory of that from my frontal lobe, and it all be magic. You know, how I do well, do not. And I think that there's something quite pure about that way I used to play before I started doing before we started in podcasting, or at least until we kind of ragabody cracked the code. And you know, as I gave FPL team Pete his flowers, the ragabody obviously deserves his massively too, putting a lot of work. I'm very glad that Live FPL is continuing for another year, and another one that I'm more than happy to pay for, or at least kind of voluntarily give contribution to, because I think that the work that he's done is ridiculous. And yeah, I'll still be kind of looking at that this year because, you know, the effective ownership is the kind of the keystone piece of what fantasy games run on, really, in terms of where your rank lies. That's the way. So yeah, It's good real-time ownership for the reasons you mentioned. I think maybe it will benefit a lot of people who aren't us. But I think for me, a lot of my FPL content is still probably going to come outside of the FPL app. I don't really want the content in terms of their analysis. If you like it, good. I don't, and I don't think I'll be doing kind of match days on the FPL app, so to speak. Positional changes, not as many this year that are particularly driving us crazy. Obviously, the big one was Creepy Junior Sam, who clever, enterprising people. I think it was Louis FPL Reaction on X worked it out that he got up to 7.5, and because he played at number 10 a little while for a little bit behind Evan Nilsson, managed to end up being being a midfielder. Shades of Aubameyang getting to the midfielder slot in your past. I know Aubameyang was a different position. I understand that, but that one feels a bit incongruous to me. Obviously, the City game up first as well, but up 7.5. I think that could be really interesting purely because he's on penalties.
Yeah, 100%. 7.5 seems very reasonable for a penalty taking midfielder who effectively is playing as a striker. I think what FPL have done is had a look at the positional map on something like a SofaScore or FootMob or something, or Transfer Market, and I think it shows in a number of those that effectively he played cam in 14 of the last 18 starts or something, and therefore they mapped him out as a midfielder because of that, when actually, to you or I watching the game, he plays as a shadow striker, and it feels a little bit wrong to call him a midfielder. But at some point this season, given he stays at Bournemouth as well, by the way, or in the Premier League even, he could be a bit of a game breaker. Not loving the fixtures to begin with, but maybe it doesn't matter for a player like him, arguably. So yeah, one to closely look at, and in that pool of players that are reasonably good value between 7 and 8 million as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was a kind of a small list of players who had changed. The only other one was probably Weaver, who was good last year, back to defender. Does lose those recoveries and does lose kind of, I think it was about 40%, wasn't it, of his DEFCON, not points, but DEFCON contributions because of losing the recoveries. But I mean, still potentially worth a look. But there's nothing here which is, apart from, I think those are the two sort of headlines, aren't they, really, Sam? I mean, nothing massively, unless I missed something, which is really kind of moving the dial on any of these players.
Yeah, I mean, nothing as important as those two. A quick mention to one or two. So Dorgu's a midfielder, so unfortunately you're not going to get a flying left winger for Man United playing in defence on FPL this year. So that's a bit of a shame. Marmoush being reclassified as a forward, I would say correctly, is maybe one that isn't interesting to us now, but if Haaland ever gets injured, that's very interesting because that saves us an extra transfer. Whereas last season, if you wanted him, you would have had to not only get rid of Haaland, but also buy Marmoush in midfield. This year, it's just one quick transfer. So if Haaland gets a significant injury, one transfer, you've saved yourself 8.5 million and you can just go straight ahead with Marmoush. I think that's about it, really. But yeah, not too many exciting ones beyond those.
Yeah, and the final thing, changed the bonus. A few kind of bits of poozling around under the hood, and the key one is trying to compensate for defenders effectively double dipping and getting bonus and DEFCON. So Gabriel, for example, would actually have not made the 200 club, depending if this year's rules were in place last year, and also not being penalised for being tackled now. So bonus phobes like Doku can now go about their business unimpeded by a bonus penalty, which I think was quite cool. In the interest of time, just to kind of summarize, I think I'm just going to basically just repeat what you said a few times throughout this. It feels like kind of last year we had like a seismic change to FPL with DEFCON coming in, a completely new source of points. This year it was more like a quality of life shopping list that had been ticked off. And I think we, without blowing our own trumpet too much, I think it's probably perhaps one of those things people look at and think, oh yeah, but that's quite obvious, wasn't it? So don't go on about it too much. But we did say at the end of last year that probably they're going to leave it, gather more data on something like DEFCON, just think, well, last year was maybe a bit of an anomaly in terms of Arteta ball. Let's just leave it, gather more data, a bit of below the hood tweaking, and that was it. and also premium, as I keep mentioning, utterly wet the bed. So yeah, quality of life. The phrase you keep saying is a phrase that I would completely also use to sum up the changes to FPL this year. Post-World Cup fatigue. Nick's just asked about that in the chat, so very good time to move on to it. Certainly something which is going to be in play. Certainly, with the news of Saliba missing a lot of the start of the year, having gone to the World Cup with a back problem, the likes of Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka for Arsenal. Obviously, I would say that as an Arsenal fan, but the likes of those two, probably I would be surprised to see them before game week 4. To be honest, I think they need a proper rest and kind of an individualized pre-season plan for both of them during the season itself. I think that in itself maybe could kill some bench boost one plans, and I don't know. I feel like there's going to be a lot to kind of just take stock of. And I think that, in fact, there may be, I don't know what you think, Sam, but maybe a cause to early, like wildcards, kind of game week 4 or 5, once these players are all back in terms of FPL. And by then, I guess the dust may have begun to settle.
Yeah, I've been thinking that as well. And I wonder whether we'll even have enough information by game week 4 or 5. Like, if let's take Arsenal, because you're an Arsenal fan as well, and I think they're going to be pretty hard done by like Saka, Rice, Saliba as well. Let's say Saka and Rice, they take a month off now, which I think they have to do, and then they get up and running with preseason, or their version of preseason, maybe a week before the season starts. So they're not going to be okay for game week 1. They're probably not going to be ready by game week 2 or 3, maybe 3 if you're Rice, possibly, but he looked like he needed a break. Basically, are we going to have enough information or enough certainty on those kinds of players by the time we get to game week 4 or 5 to just immediately wildcard into them? Or, like we've seen a few times in seasons past, are these players going to be, even if they're not rushed back, are they going to get up and running quickly enough? Are they going to maybe take until Christmas before they really look their true selves again? We've seen it with players like, was it Foden a couple of years ago, for instance, off the back of the Euros, Palmer as well, possibly, maybe Saka as well. There are a few players that it really looked like they're non-options until we really got into halfway through the season. They were playing games after a few weeks, but they didn't really look themselves. So I wonder if that's going to be a bit of a thing across the board. Obviously, we've referenced Arsenal, but loads of teams affected. And I think we're quite fortunate that there are a few quite good high upside players who haven't been at the World Cup this year, who will be probably quite fresh, ready to go game week 1, and they can maybe just make up the majority of our team to begin with. Like, I don't think I've got too many beyond the obvious big hitting 2 that are generally fit no matter what. I don't think I've got too many that would be impacted by World Cup right now. And maybe that's just a non-conscious thing going on in the back of my mind. Like, I don't have Saka, Rice, Anderson, Porro even at the moment. That Nobby mentioned all 4 of them, which is the only reason I'm mentioning them. I'm not picking on them per se, but I've not got any of them in my team right now. And I think part of that reason is the World Cup and the fact that they have played a lot of minutes. They probably will have either a very short preseason, or the preseason will run into the actual season. So yeah, I'm interested to see what you think as an Arsenal manager, but Arsenal fan manager. You could be a manager.
Well, I mean,
Arsenal assistant manager. What are you thinking about it? One day.
I think those two need to be rested 100%. I mean, Declan Rice hasn't looked the same since probably March, I'm going to say. Like, is clearly just knackered. Let's face it. I mean, we obviously didn't do the Club World Cup, but the load on these players, and Saka obviously getting that injury, I wanted these players to have a rest for a long time. I mean, the Mitchell and Webb sketch, the football, watch the football, watch it, it's going to move.
Love that one.
A lot of these players are just absolutely exhausted, Sam. And I'm more than anything, going back to the depth point we spoke about earlier on the pricing, happy for these players to literally just go off, relax, come back for the business end of the season. We've got enough in the tank for, well, hopefully with a couple more signings. But we've got enough in the tank to make it work in your absence. Come back when we really need you in those decisive moments later on in the season, and fully fit and able to kind of push through an entire year. And I mean, from that's from a fan point of view, and from an FPL point of view, neither of these players actually. I mean, probably Saka and probably Rice, because again, week 1 would be on my agenda, but because of how everything's looking in terms of Haaland, Bruno, and fitting everything else in, I'm kind of quite glad that they are players we can just forget about a little bit, honestly. I mean, looking at my draft, which we'll talk about in just literally a second, we're almost there. I've only got one player from the England team, who is Nico O'Reilly, and even that one I might come back to and think, oh, actually, maybe there. Oh, maybe I swap that over.
Yeah.
We move on to first draft, Sam, given the fact that we've been going for an hour somehow, despite saying that we were rusty and we might not get there.
Yeah, well, that's part of being rusty. We tend to ramble a bit when we're rusty, I've noticed. We're less concise. So maybe that's what's happened here. But yeah, O'Reilly's an interesting one. Your draft's up here. Yeah, O'Reilly, will he need a preseason after the 4-week break as well? I don't know. He's younger. He's had less minutes in the tank, so possibly he's okay. But yeah, time will tell. Anyway, your draft.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is the team that I will start with in game week 1, and I think that you should all pillory me if I don't do that. No, I'm kidding.
Locked in, yeah.
Locked in, absolutely locked in. This is it. I'm done. But oh god, that joke.
That would be great, wouldn't it? If you just ended up on this exact draft. Can you imagine? Save ourselves 4 weeks of effort. It'd be great.
Yeah. We know each other too well, so that's not been the case. This draft has changed about 12 times. No, it hasn't actually. I've just left it, and my policy is that I don't actually change it that much until we get towards it. I obviously mess around with it loads, but I'm not going to change it that much until we get to a point where I need to make a change here. I think that there's definitely a reason to. But yeah, so basically this squashes the bench. It has the basic kind of amount on the bench, which is a 4.0 goalkeeper, a 4.0 defender who is Diop, a 4.5 midfielder who's Will Hughes as Crystal Palace, appearance points hero, and then a scrub, by which I mean a 4.0 defender from someone. As you can tell,
pronounce his name for me, because I'm unsure and I've got him as well.
Van Uwick.
Van Uwick, perfect. I knew that. Yeah, definitely.
He's a right back, isn't he?
Yeah, he got like 9 assists for Coventry last season.
Yeah. I went on Foot Mob and saw that. So in goal, I've got Verbruggen. That could be Petrovic. That could be Leno. I don't really know. Verbruggen's one of those players I've got a love-hate relationship with it. But I think that unless I go up to Raya, at the moment, I'm not entirely convinced of the 5 goalkeepers. It might be that I end up, if I do get rid of O'Reilly, I end up with Donnarumma. My lord, that is the most boring sentence I've ever said in my life, but that might be what I do. But yeah, I've got Verbruggen in goal. Back 3 are O'Reilly, Calafiori, just because he's so sexy. No, because he's I think he's probably kind of our left back, especially with Timber probably injured. We'll see what happens with Nkapie, but I think that Calafiori is probably going to get the nod at least early doors, and yeah, I'm quite happy with that. And then I've got Luke Shaw at 4.5. I think he's a very kind of, he played actually every game last year. I think his DEFCON hit rate wasn't that high. It was about kind of like 10% or something like that. Towards the end of the season, he did it right. But he played every game last year. And just for the first 2, I think that he could be a kind of a decent pickup for like literally early doors, and I kind of take it from there. Hato as well, at 4.5 is the other one that I did look at as an idea. With Cucurella gone, he could be one who does step into the team at that left back slot. But I think Luke Shaw is kind of at 4.5 okay. Rodon, I think, at 4.5 is also kind of one that I've thought about. De Cooper, and also Kadioglu at 4.5. But for the first two, I just felt like, well, just shove your Man United defender in there and get on with it. In midfield, I've got Bruno Fernandes, who probably takes the armband for game one as far as I can see. I've got Ndai, I've got Krupi Jr., who could be Rodgers. I'm not entirely sure about that one yet. And I've got Cunha at 8.0. I actually quite like occupying that. I mean, you spoke about it earlier on, actually, in terms of making sure that you've got that sort of interchangeability with players around that price point. I quite like having Cunha there. For the first two, flattrackbully.com. Goose was saying in the chat earlier about Sesko at 7.0, who I do actually quite like. But he's coming back from a shin injury, so maybe we might see Cunha start the first couple. I actually quite like that kind of. It could be Bumo, but I quite like that kind of United attack double up for the first couple, just because they are such good games. I can imagine United doing okay in those. So Cunha's there at the moment. Krupi and Ndai. I've never been like the biggest proponent of Ndai, but the fact he's on penalties does sort of make me think, oh, well, it might be worth it. And Krupi could be worth it again at 7.5, but I said they could be Rodgers. And up front, Haaland, I think, yeah, I'm not even going to countenance at any point going against that. João Pedro, I think at 7.5. The term gift gets overused sometimes on FPL. But him not getting a price rise, I'm still getting over it, honestly. I think that is really surprising. I mean, you could have Cole Palmer at 9.5. Maybe you'll have Cole Palmer at 9.5, not have João Pedro. But, I mean, the guy's been fully rested. You know he's a good FPL asset, only getting better over the years. Recorded 177 last year. I mean, wow, what a legend. And then I've got 343 because I'm just basic, Sam. I'm basic. I just saw Calvert-Lewin's 6. I was just like, well, Leeds' fixtures are all right. Start of the year, guys on penalties. The guy, as you know well from the time with him, knows where the goal is.
Oh yeah. That's what they all say about him. Yeah,
he is on
great
penalties.
finisher.
He is on penalties, and he is kind of oddly fulfilling that odd kind of Bamford role at Leeds, where for Farke, where the whole system is not exactly designed to service him, but he's getting a lot of chances, and he does seem to have kind of remembered that he can do goals as per last year. At 6, I thought that was that's actually a really good bargain. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment. The 343 amount of thought's been put into it. I'm going to say low to mid.
Yeah,
thus far. But yeah, I mean, that's where I am. I do think that O'Reilly may end up, depending on information, moving up somebody else.
Yeah, so first off, it's a really good first draft. I like every single one of the players that you've got in your starting 11, which is interesting because I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players are different of the starting. I think we've got 5 in common of the 11, and yet I like all of the 6 that you've got that I don't. And I think that says a lot. And there are players that we mutually don't have, as in either of us have, that I really like as well, that would still be in consideration for me. So it feels like there's quite a wide pool to narrow in from at the moment. But yeah, really like the structure. I think the clever thing about this draft is you've covered off a lot of the major price points. So you've got the flexibility to get across to another 8 million midfielder or another 8 million striker fairly easily. And you're not going to have to worry too much if someone pops off, with the exception of Palmer or Isak. But if one of those two pops off, then it's just sacrifice one of the more expensive, like Acuna, for instance, and then upgrade, or maybe Cunha and Krupi, and you take one up, you take one down, and jobs are good. And so I think that's got flexibility. The question marks would be in defense for me at the moment. O'Reilly, will he be okay to start the season? Time will tell. If it looks like he's going to be ready by game week 1, I will really want him as well. And then Calafiori, I was actually going to take your lead on that because I'll switch over to my draft now. I initially had Calafiori until about 10 minutes before I put this team into the spreadsheet. And I decided, no, I'm going to play it safe for now. I'm going to go with Mosquera for now, and then I'll talk to Tom on the stream, and if he's confident, then that will give me a bit more confidence. Yeah, I'm happy enough with Mosquera, but I prefer Calafiori if I feel like he's safe for the first few. So yeah, that's a 5.5 million Arsenal defender. I've gone Kinski in goal. I feel like Spurs are quite likely to get significantly better defensively this season under De Zerbi, especially with the defensive transfers they've made. And Kinski at the moment looks like they're starting 4.5. Obviously, open to changing that if they sign someone. Agree with all the points you made on Luke Shaw. 38 starts last season. Who saw that coming? But at 4.5 with those two fixtures first up, I really feel like that's a pretty simple one. And then Williams at Nottingham Forest under Glasner. He tends to have one wing back really bombing forward, as we've seen with Munoz. That looks likely to be Williams this season. In the preseason friendlies, he's the one that is advancing. He's also not bad on DEFCON either. So yeah, I like what I see with Williams. Even last season, his underlying data wasn't all that bad either. And they've got some good fixtures to begin with. So I've gone with him. I've also gone with Camvo on the bench, a bit of a DEFCON guy at Palace. But I think he rotates pretty reasonably with Shaw and Williams if needs be. So I'm happy enough with him for now. But again, is he nailed? Absolutely not. In my draft, there's a lot of 4.5s and 5 million defenders that could end up in that position. Midfield four of no shocks there. Fernandez and Jai as well, I think will be in a lot of drafts at 6 million. Don't hate Garner at 6 million either, by the way, but the pens are just shading it for me at the moment. And then Szoboszlai I've kept in. I like Liverpool's opening few fixtures. It felt wrong to go with no Liverpool. I do have 0.5 in the bank, by the way. So if I wanted Wirtz instead of Szoboszlai, I could do it. If I wanted Rodgers, I could do that. So there are possibilities there. And then Mbeumo I've gone with as my other Man United midfielder. I thought I was being clever. I really thought I was being clever and you wouldn't be going with another Man United midfielder. And then when I saw Cunha, my heart sank. And I thought that'd be my differential little I'm going to really target Hull and you're all going to laugh at me and it's going to be great. And no, of course not. You've picked one as well. So I've gone in Mbeumo for now. Again, I've not really got a preference between him and Cunha. If it looks likely Cunha's going to start up top, I will probably switch. But I like Mbeumo. I think he was unlucky not to get more than he did last season. And then up top, only one difference. So I won't go over the very well valued João Pedro or Haaland. I've gone with Solanke for now. Not necessarily because I think he's better than Calvert-Lewin or any of the other sixes. More of a talking point. I think he's potentially he's got the potential to be game breaking at 6 if he stays fit. And we've said in seasons past with someone like Calvert-Lewin, oh yeah, but he won't stay fit. But then when he did, he ended up being really good value for money. So if Solanke is fully fit at the start of the season and does get regular 90s, I think at 6 million in a De Zerbi side, that could be really, really interesting. And I wouldn't want to just overlook him automatically because of what has happened before. I think at Bournemouth, he was actually relatively injury free. Someone can probably correct me on that, but my memory was he was fairly safe to start most weeks. So hopefully this injury's out the way and he's fine now. It's just whether or not they buy a striker or whether Richarlison steals minutes. But it looks like De Zerbi prefers Solanke.
Oh,
so
yeah, absolutely.
I quite like him. But yeah, again, not locked. Could easily be DCL. Could be Igor Jesus as well, who I really like. So many players. I mean, we haven't even mentioned Gibbs White, and he could easily be in a draft right now, as could Isak and as could Palmer. I very, very, very nearly had Palmer in this draft instead and shifted the shape a little bit and went with a 3-5-2. Got a really strong gut feeling on Palmer, so I don't want to miss out. But I think this balance works slightly better. And yeah, I don't know. I could easily end up on a Palmer draft because I think he will be overlooked largely because he was poor last season. But if he's had a preseason, he's in a Xavi Alonso system that works for him with his best mate Rodgers next to him, quite like it. But yeah, this is where I'm at for now.
Yeah, no, really like that as well. Going a bit cheaper in defence, I guess.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I
Spreading
think
it
it's
a bit.
just
'Cause
it's
I'd
like
put a bit more on the bench. Yeah.
yeah, if you take O'Reilly out and then you end up with Williams and then you've got that extra money to distribute, I like it. Classic price. How many penalty takers is that? One, two,
I
three,
did. My
four,
first draft
five.
had 7, and I've taken 1 or 2 out.
Yeah,
Basically, my first draft, instead of Mbermo, it had Gibbs White, so that's an extra penalty taker. And instead of João Pedro, it had Thiago, which I do have money for. And then I would have had 7 penalty takers. That's the first draft that I was referencing earlier to you. And I've just fiddled with it to have João Pedro and Mbermo instead of Thiago and Gibbs White. So it's 5 pens instead of 7, but I could end up with 7.
fair. What I take from this, I really like Slanky. Slanky or DCL feels a bit interchangeable to me, actually. I think that they both offer a very similar profile when fit.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember who was the striker for Brighton on the Derby. How did they do? I can't think. But yeah, I just kind of my main takeaway from this is kind of that we both shockingly are thinking along similar lines in terms of not really taking any risks with new players. I mean, obviously, I was burnt last year by Verts, and in the past, been burnt by Havertz, and also just trusting in what we know. Every season is obviously very different. When it comes to the crunch around kind of the middle of the year, we know a bit more. As it is right now, I think this is a really good team to just go into the season with as a starter pack, and then from
it
there
does
you
feel
start
very
to
starter
iterate.
pack, doesn't it?
I think that's fine, and I think that it's as you've kind of detailed a couple of times, it's very much about those the Ndiays, the Szoboszlais, the Slanky pick, and at the back that defender sort of setup. It's all about not getting them right, because you're not going to be able to get them right without the benefit of hindsight resulting, but it's kind of about setting that up in a way that defense, you're not going to be starting with Mascara and then suddenly Arteta fancies playing Calafiori um, uh, and then plays Hincapié alongside Gabriel for some reason. That's the only risk there. But it feels like we've both kind of gone down quite a risk-free or a risk-averse sort of way of doing it, which I don't mind at all, honestly. Nobby said in chat, it was João Pedro, who was the strike on Zerbi. And João Pedro wasn't too bad at Brighton.
Yeah. I think Evan Ferguson did also bang in a hat-trick early days, didn't he? If I remember rightly. He burst onto the scene and then disappeared.
Yeah, I remember João Pedro was paid as like a 9.5 a lot of the time as well. But hey, I mean, by the by, yeah, I like Slanky a lot. I think when he was at Bournemouth, I think we were both waxing lyrical about that. I think my bold claim last year was that Slanky was the highest scoring forward. Actually, so I don't mind Slanky at all. I'm not using Solvers this year, but I can imagine he's much loved by the Solvers as well. Not that I'm accusing you.
I don't think the Solvers are live yet, are they?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure they will. Okay, they will like Slanky a lot more.
If they're interesting. I don't know. I'll check after this.
Yeah, I'm pretty.
They'll probably love Calvert Lewin, to be honest, won't they? On pens, 90 minutes.
Yeah, of course. Would Slanky be on pens for Spurs? I'd imagine
think so.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. So I think they're kind of just substitute goods, aren't they? Effectively for
Spurs fan might tell me differently. I thought he was on pens.
I think so. And yeah, I just think the double Man United attack, double Man United midfield, that is, kind of makes sense, because those first 2 games, they're kind of the shining beacon of kind of, that is worth putting in for, really.
Yeah, it's also on that. I really like the idea of, I don't like booking in transfers, and of course you don't need to sell someone like Cunha or Mbermo in game week 3 or 4 because they're still good, but the first 2 fixtures are the best 2, and then usually by game week 3 there's a really sexy midfield pick that everyone really wants. Well, great, because you've got a midfielder who's 8 million. You can get to most other midfielders in the game pretty easily, and they've just had their best 2 fixtures, so you might not hate getting rid of them anyway. So
Yeah.
If no one else appears, then it's fine. You can hold on to them. They're still good picks. But equally, they're quite easy to get rid of after the first 2 weeks are out of the way. If Morgan Rogers just looks incredible, or Gibbs White, or name any midfielder under 8 million, you can easily just move across and you don't have to worry. So I quite like that for that reason.
Yeah. Okay. I'm on board with it. Well, let's see how that evolves over time. and I think we'll be checking in with our teams as we go through the preseason. So just to end preseason schedule, cutting up the pricing into 2, as I've mentioned. So obviously today we've had launch day. Next Tuesday, we'll be back Tuesday 28th with chunks. So the premium and high price players. And I think it's worth kind of delving into those separately. I think in the past we've done the pricing pod and been like daunted by the fact that we'll probably be speaking for 2 hours about all these players. So it's good to just kind of chunk it up a little bit and do those chunks first. The week after, 4th August, there'll be tiddlers, so the middle and low price players, which I think are actually going to play, from the discussion we've had, quite an outsized role this year in terms of being those guys, the edge pieces, who are hopefully going to be those who garner points going forward. I'm actually on holiday the week after that, but we'll be pre-recording and probably do it live on YouTube on, I think that's the Thursday after the sixth pod with hopefully a guest on 10 simple rules to assist you towards FPL success. And it's a well-wrought kind of thing in the general sort of way of doing things. But we'll offer our 2 pennies on that. And as I'll be away for a week, then I'll probably aim to get Talisman Theory posted up by then. And then a final game week 1 preview on Thursday the 18th or Tuesday the 18th. We'll talk about how we're tweaking the structure to game week pods this year. Can't wait. I think that I'm very glad that preseason is very short. I know that it's kind of Christmas for a lot of people. For me, having done it 10 years, I'm a bit kind of like, I just want to get it started, really. But there is a lot to talk about, and there will be a lot of analysis to do. And the nerdy part of me can't wait to be doing those homebrews as I do every year.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, there's loads of lovely research to be doing for the next few weeks. And by the time we get to game week 1, I think the name of the game is not to be exhausted by it all and be excited and ready to go. Not like you've had a really hardcore preseason where you're actually out of fitness. So, yeah, hopefully this is short enough that we'll be okay. And we do all of the necessary research and get ready, but without feeling like we've overcooked it somewhat. But I'm really looking forward to it. I feel fresh, ready to go, and I've really enjoyed chatting to you today, Tom. Hopefully you've all enjoyed listening. Thank you all so much for tuning in, for listening, for watching to the very first edition of the 10th season of WGTA. We do hope you've enjoyed it and are on board for another year. As I mentioned, we have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. I'm on there at FPL Pricey. On X, it's WGTA_FPL. Again, FPL Pricey on there. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. And I'm on there at FPL Pricey as well. And if you did enjoy the pod, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us a follow on those social channels. Give the pod a 5-star rating if you're listening along. And of course, leaving a like and hitting subscribe on YouTube is very much appreciated as well. All of those things really do help us out. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Thanks to all listeners, new and old, and somewhere in between. I'm really glad to be back next Tuesday for FPL Pricing Chonks Edition. We hope we assist you get back in the spirit of FPL for another year, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?